When advertising began in a significant way in the early 19th century, it was a relatively straightforward business. It showed you a product, told you what it did, where you could get it, and what it cost. Then, in 1960s America, a remarkable new way of advertising emerged, led by luminaries of Madison Avenue like William Birnbach, David Ogilvy, and Mary Wells Lawrence. In their work for brands like Esso, Avis, and Life Cereal, adverts ceased to be in a narrow sense about the things that they were selling. The focus of an ad might ostensibly be on a car, but our attention was also being directed at the harmonious, handsome couple holding hands beside it. It might on the surface be an advert about soap, but the true emphasis was on the state of calm that accompanied the washing. It might be whiskey one was being invited to drink, but it was the attitude of resoluteness and resilience on display that provided the compelling focal point. Madison Avenue had made an extraordinary discovery. However appealing a product might be, there were many other things that were likely to be even more appealing to customers, and by entwining their products with these ingredients, sales could be transformed.
The purpose of advertisements is no longer to have the consumer immediately pick up the phone and buy the product. The purpose of these advertisements is not to inform the consumer about the product and its features. The reason companies like McDonald's, who have an almost universal recognition, still advertise is because they are trying to build an opinion and corresponding brand image in their consumers' minds. There are two main psychological methods that marketers use nowadays for their advertisements. The first method is called the mere exposure method. These are those minimalist, bare-bones advertisements that make you scratch your head and wonder why the company would spend thousands of dollars on them. It's because everyone is more comfortable in groups. If one line at the bank is considerably longer than the other, people will almost always go to the longer line, because they think that there must be a reason that people choose one line over the other. They think that one line is better than the other, or one line is more correct than the other. It's just an easier and more comfortable decision. It's the same kind of idea in consumer psychology. By exposing the consumer to the brand, the consumers start to feel like they know it. Because of this, when the consumer goes to the store to buy detergent, they can reach for Tide and be comfortable in this decision. The Tide detergent might be a couple dollars more than the store brand detergent, but they know that this brand detergent will work well. It wouldn't be such a huge brand if it didn't work so well. The other common psychological method used in marketing is the classic conditioning method. The idea behind this technique came from a study done by Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov in the 1890s. Pavlov noticed that his dogs would start to salivate whenever he would enter the room, even if he didn't have food. This was because the dogs had an expectation that they would receive food when Pavlov came into the room, because every time he did have food, he would walk into the room. Pavlov decided to start ringing a bell whenever he gave food to his dogs, and after a while, the dogs would, whenever they heard the sound of a bell, start salivating. This is because the dogs were trained to associate the sound of the bell with food coming. They were trained to have the expectation of food. The same psychological principle works with humans. Brands will try to have certain feelings, reactions, or images associated with their product. If in their advertisements they show certain images in conjunction with their product, the consumer will subconsciously relate the images to the product. The best part of this technique is that it always works. No matter how much you try to block out the advertisements, as long as you see them, you will start to subconsciously relate the two images.
Patek Philippe is one of the giants of the global watchmaking industry. Since 1996, they've been running a very distinctive series of adverts featuring parents and children. It's almost impossible not to have glimpsed one somewhere. In one example, a father and son are hanging out together in scenes which tenderly evoke filial and paternal loyalty and love. We can imagine the boy will grow up confident and independent, yet also respectful and warm. The advert understands our deepest hopes around our children. It's moving because what it depicts is so hard to find in real life. We're often brought to tears not so much by what we have, as by what we long for but cannot reach. Father-son relationships are dependably problematic. But in the world of Patek Philippe, we glimpse a kind of psychological paradise. We can turn to Calvin Klein. The couple seem like they might have been together a while. They may have a couple of children, and they're in it for the long term. The perfume is called Eternity. But their passion is still so intense. They have sex maybe a couple of times a day, often in unusual locations. Calvin Klein knows all about what we really want in relationships. It's brilliantly latched on to our deepest and at the same time our most elusive inner longings. Calvin Klein makes lovely cologne. Patek Philippe's watches are extremely reliable and beautiful agents of timekeeping. But these items cannot by themselves help us secure the goods our unconscious believed were on offer. Adverts wouldn't work if they didn't operate with a very good understanding of what our real needs are, what we truly require to be happy. Their emotional pull is based on knowing us eerily well. As they recognize, we are creatures who hunger for good family relationships, connections with others, a sense of freedom and joy, a promise of self-development, dignity, calm, and the feeling that we're respected. Yet armed with this knowledge, they and the corporations who bankroll them are unwittingly somewhat cruel to us. For while they excite us with reminders of our buried longings, they cannot do anything wholehearted about quenching them. Adverts may want to sell us things, but incommensurate things in relation to the hopes they've aroused.
Advertising is the arm of creating artificial demand. And without that arm, you wouldn't have people aspiring to things that are highly irrational. When advertising presents something to the community that seems to be something that some people want, it spreads like a virus and then everybody wants it. Because it's an issue of social inclusion, because that's how we identify. We identify and define ourselves by how others see us and how we are included in the group, which is a part of our biology. So it manipulates our most primal sense of humanity in order to sell things. When you first start an economy of this nature, like in the agrarian society, you're meeting demand, right? That's the point, and that makes sense. But at some point, this had to change because when you have such a highly efficient, productive society that we have now, at least in the technical sense of what we can create, you have to have demand created now. And then progress, of course, being defined by what we produce. The more you buy, the more you own. That must be progress now. Because if you create a society that thrives in this type of self-identification, you're basically also promoting not only the destruction of the environment, but the diminishment of others. Because you're saying that I can afford this, I have the status, and I'm better for that, and this person can't. And we see that, phenomenally amplified today in the modern world. I often wonder what a world would be like without advertising, which would be a world without marketing and markets. And I can tell you it would be far more peaceful and sustainable and amiable and humane than what we see today.